Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I just want to pause the video really quick to talk about the title, Advanced Building Tips. Now I know I'm already going to get a comment that says, oh my god, these tips are so basic, why would you call this advanced? There are people out there who are just starting out with the game, figuring out how to build stuff. There are people who are intermediate builders and they kind of have a good sense of what to do, and then there are advanced builders who've really tested out everything. I hope that these tips here in this video help those beginner and intermediate players figure out things that are maybe not so obvious or more obscure, but then can help your building go one step further. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Let's get into the video. So the first advanced tip that I'd like to talk about is trying to build on overhanging pieces. This is something that I'd found out and tried to figure out myself while building my treehouse, and it's a little tip that I hope can help you. As you can see here, I'm struggling to actually put the piece over the edge, and you'd have to get pretty much right up to the edge for your character not to block you, and pretty much toe the line between falling off and getting another piece on. As you can see here, if you fall off, you take quite a bit of damage. There, I took 23 damage, almost killed myself, just from being about 8 meters high. And the way to do this safely is to actually use the 1 meter and 2 meter wood beams, because when you attach the beams to the boards, they actually stick out further. So what you can do is attach a 1 meter beam to the edge, and then attach a 2 meter one so that the 2 meter one sticks out, and now you'll have a snap point for your floor piece. And you can do this as well from the sides as well. You could just put a 1 meter again down first, and then put a 2 meter down to stick out to the sides, and then now you can put a 2 meter on both sides so that you can continue to expand on either side. This helped me a lot when I was building my treehouse, because then I don't have to worry about hanging off the sides to try to get the perfect snap point. I could just stand on the floorboard and build outwards with no fear of falling off. So the next tip I have for you is related to leveling the ground properly with using the hoe and the pickaxe. If we look at the hoe first, you'll see there's a circular ring where it tells you the radius of what you're going to level, but there's also a vertical bar. That vertical bar basically shows the difference between the current terrain's level, and then the top of the bar is where it's going to level to. So you'll see if I hold it up over this distance here, there's a big difference between where the ground is actually at and where I'm going to level to. And then if I move it over here, you'll see it's very close because it's pretty much the same level. One key thing to remember is that the top of the bar is in relation to where your character's feet are. So pretty much wherever you're standing is wherever you're going to level to. So if I'm stood up high here, when I level the ground down in front of me, it's going to level it up to my feet level. But if I were to stand down low and click level, now it would try to force the ground down to where my feet are standing. That's why it's very important to think about where you're standing when you do go to level an area, because this is how you can create inconsistencies if you're constantly moving up and down in terrain as you're clicking level. One last thing to note with the hoe is that normally it always tries to connect it back to your feet level. But if you hold shift, you can actually bring it down to the terrain you're looking at and just level that area. So for example here, if I don't hold shift and I just leave it as it is, it brings the terrain up to myself. But if I hold shift, it will just level the terrain that's down below. This is how you can kind of adjust between leveling up to you and just leveling it directly in case you don't want to have to climb down. And the same thing works looking upwards. If you're leveling, normally if you just looked at it, if you looked at the terrain here for example, it would just drop it straight down to your feet as much as possible. But if I looked over here, I could hold shift and I can actually raise up the terrain slightly. So you can actually both raise and drop down the terrain depending if you're holding shift or not. The next part of this is how you use the pickaxe to level and terraform the area around you. The first thing you need to know with the pickaxe is where you stand in relation to where you're actually striking the ground will affect whether the terrain raises or lowers. You can see here, because I was stood too close to the edge there, all the dirt that I just mined away has gathered under my feet and caused the terrain to push me up slightly. And if you stand too far away, your pickaxe will end up just hitting at your feet level instead of the wall in front of you, causing you to dig pretty much straight down with no forward progress. So if you want to dig forward, keeping it straight and level, what you have to do is kind of find the sweet spot between being too close and too far away, and strike right onto the wall in front of you. If you do it correctly, as you can see here, you should be able to take off an entire chunk in front of you without your character ever raising or lowering. It does take some practice and some time to get the right feel. As you can see a couple times here, I ever so slightly lower down because I'm just a little bit too close or I'm a little bit too far away. But for the most part, if you get the general sense of it, you'll be able to keep it mostly straight with ever so slight deviations in your level. And you'll also notice I'm keeping very straight as I'm walking forward in order to have that straight wall cut away as I'm digging. And the last thing I want to show here is, let's say you've created a trench but you don't like it and you want to raise it back up to the original level it was at. What you can do is take your hoe and start to raise the ground from the middle. You'll notice if I were to raise the ground here, it takes me about 5, maybe even 6 hits for me to actually raise the ground all the way up to where it was before. That's at least 20 stone that I've got to use in order to replace the earth that I've dug away. So the trick I have for you here is, if you have a hole that you want to fill in, to actually put your cursor just a little bit off the top edge of where you want to raise it to, maybe about 6 inches down from the side. And you'll notice all I got to do is just do one click, and you'll see I've pretty much filled off an entire section with just one click. This is a much more efficient way of filling in the ground if you do have to fill in any trenches or any holes that you've dug in. If you ever look at your cabin and feel it's a little bit too dark and claustrophobic because there's no windows, well, this is how tip 3 is going to help you. Sometimes it's important to remember that the building pieces can be used in a variety of creative ways. For example, the round pole fence doesn't have to be just used as a fence. You could place the fence like this, clipped into the walls, rotate it one way and clip the other side in, and in here you created a little window shutter for yourself to look through and enjoy the views outside without having a complete open gap. Another tip related to building when you're up high is the fact that you can't build campfires unless they're touching the terrain or some kind of stone object. As you can see here, I can't place the campfire down because it's on wood and it's hanging above. However, if you see my treehouse builds, you'll know that stone actually clips into trees and it'll stay and hang there, be considered a foundational piece actually. So we can use this to our advantage by placing 2 stone blocks against the tree, then placing our campfire down. And now we can actually take away the stone blocks, and the campfire, you'll see, stays in its position. This is quite interesting. I've noticed the campfire doesn't actually get destroyed, so all you do then is just replace the floors underneath, and now you've got your campfire that's raised up. This also works with a hearth. You just place 2 stone blocks down, you build a hearth which is the same size wide. If I just move out the way here, and placing it down, we'll be able to create a hearth that's raised up away from the ground. And don't worry, the trees don't take fire damage, so you're not going to burn the tree. One thing to note though is the bonfires don't actually work when placed on stone. The bonfires only work when they're placed on the terrain itself, on the ground. I hope this is just a bug and the devs fix this. For example, if you wanted to build a raised up lighthouse using a bonfire as the beacon, you can't really do this right now. Hopefully this gets fixed though. And lastly, my 5th tip is a minor cosmetic thing. When you're building with wood iron beams, it gives off a certain metal aesthetic look. However, if you're trying to keep the same wooden feel to the rest of your structure, what you can do is actually cover the wood iron poles with core wood logs. Now horizontally though, the core wood logs snap above and below the intersecting point between 2 pieces, as opposed to the wood iron pieces that go right in between the gap. One trick is to aim on the opposite pole and try to cover it by clipping it in that way. So if you want to do it this way, you can as well. So that's it guys, those are just quick 5 little tips to help you guys take your building that much further. Hope you enjoyed that, see you guys next time.